Hello, I'm Sandy Rosenthal, host of Beat the Big Guys podcast. And today we're going to do something a little different. Yes, most of my episodes are based on an interview with a guest who has beat the big guys in his or own neighborhood or their own neighborhood. But today there's something so important that I decided it couldn't wait. And I am going to devote today's entire episode to something that I call how to recognize the fallacious remark. Or, put more simply, how to recognize when someone is just trying to get you off topic, when someone is trying to get you off balance, or when someone is trying to avoid that issue that you are trying to address in your community. It is so important and it's going to happen. It might happen in the parking lot on the way to the grocer, or it could happen at a press conference where you get the fallacious remark. Fortunately, 90% of the battle is recognizing when you've just been hit with the fallacious remark. And responding to it is really the easy part. The hard part is recognizing it when you see it. I wish someone had told me about this early on. I struggled for years with the fallacious remark. I would be standing there in a press conference or anywhere wondering why am I being asked this question that has nothing to do with the topic? Well, now I know. And again, the important thing is recognizing it. And I'm going to show you how to do that. And then we're going to talk about what to do when you get the fallacious argument. Okay. So, feeling that the best way to discuss anything is an example. I am going to provide for you an example that levees.org worked with. It was an issue that we tried to campaign with about 4 years ago. And so, what happened, just a very brief overview, it doesn't really matter what the issue is, but here's an example. So, in 2017, the data center, which is a very well known, very competent organization in New Orleans, posted a report on its website. This report was written by three authors under the management and oversight of RAND, RAND, RAND. The report was titled Current and Future Flood Risk in Greater New Orleans. Levees.org believed that the report had several erroneous points about the flooding of New Orleans and several points that were misleading and therefore could be erroneous. Why does this matter? Well, the flooding of New Orleans was a bona fide catastrophe, more than 1,500 people killed instantly, 300 more died either due to suicide or the trauma of relocation. This was a bona fide catastrophe, and everything about this disaster needs to be reported accurately. And therefore, we brought it to the attention of the data center that we had some problems with the paper. Well, one of the first things we did is we had a sit down with the executive director of the data center. And I'm going to take a moment to talk about the value of an initial powwow, of initial sit down. It's really important whenever you have an issue that you at least try to sit down and talk about it. And if you can't sit down in person, well, do a Zoom about it or have a phone call about it when possible. And if you aren't able to do it, at least show that you tried. And the reason this is important is because when the bullhorn comes out and when the torches get lit, if anyone ever asks you, did you just try to sit down and talk about it? You can say, yes, we did. We did try to sit down and talk about it, and it was not resolved. So, kudos to the data center who did offer to have a sit down and discuss our concerns. And we did sit down, we discussed the issue. Again, this is a verbal conversation. And in my mind, I recall the executive director did not agree to take the report down from its website, but he did say something about possibly updating it or putting a disclaimer on the paper on our concerns. So the meeting ended. I was pleased. I went home and typed up a summary of our meeting and sent it off to the executive director and basically asked him, did I understand our conversation correctly? A week went by, another week went by, 2 weeks went by, another 2 weeks went by. So the next thing we did is we sent the letter, the same email I'm talking about, via certified mail. We just wanted to be sure the executive director received our email. I remember they had just moved, and I thought perhaps in the chaos he didn't get my communication. So we sent this via a certified mail just to be sure that he got it in good faith. So, and I still happen to have it. Well, again, we still didn't hear after knowing that he'd received our document. So shortly after that, we notified our membership and we put a petition online, and our membership asked the data center to please remove the paper from its website. And now the subject begins, because after that, I received a letter from the executive director, the same one I had sat down with. And the letter, which I'm holding up here, has so many examples of the fallacious remark that it makes a great prop or a great tool to have a lesson on how to recognize the fallacious remark or the fallacious question. So I am going to start right now, because this is so important. Okay, the first sentence is, Ms. Rosenthal, I was surprised and disappointed to learn that blah, blah, blah. Just saying the words surprised and disappointed, the writer was trying to make it personal. And because once you're talking about how people feel about things, you're skirting the issue and getting personal with it. This issue isn't about me, Ms. Rosenthal. It isn't about the executive director of the data center. So it doesn't matter how he feels. What matters is the issue. So that's a common example of the fallacious remark. And the important thing is just recognize it when you see it. Okay. Moving on. I understand that you are going to share your email conversations with the data center out of context. There's another one. Out of context. You are going to hear that so many times. Oh, my remarks were taken out of context. Oh, what I said was taken out of context. That is, you're going to hear that so often. I've lost count of how many times I've heard it. And again, it's trying to change the subject. You're being very specific about what your concerns are. And any claim that you're doing anything out of context is, again, to knock you off balance, to knock you off kilter. You know you're on topic, and so do that. So just ignore that when you see that one. So the executive director continues to talk about how we are trying to support our apparent campaign, okay? Coupling this with furthering your agenda. So you will hear, you will be accused of having an agenda and having a campaign. Well, what's interesting is that will be made to sound like it's a dirty word, to have an agenda or to have a campaign. Yes, I have a campaign supports an agenda, which is education about why New Orleans flooded. And when everyone tried to make that sound like it's a dirty thing, that's the fallacious remark. That's the fallacious comment, just trying to get you off balance. Okay. Yeah, you have a campaign, and be proud of it. Own it. Yes, you have an agenda. It's the truth. Own it. It's okay. Recognize that remark when you see it, and it'll happen a lot. Moving right along. To be succinct, your email history with us regarding this topic suggests that your pushback on this particular paper is a result of local disputes between you and others. Okay. Yes, the organization levees.org has had many local disputes with many organizations, including the media, including members of Congress. The list goes on and on and on. Yes, there are local disputes, but again, just the fact that it is mentioned, well, you have local disputes. Yeah, own it. Own it. Yes, you have local disputes. It's something you should be proud of, because if you had not stood up and if you had done nothing, you would have lost. Moving right along. We are a neutral and independent organization. Well, good for you. You know, levy.org is a nonprofit with an education of mission. And I don't run around repeating it all day long. We know what we are and we know what you are. Whenever somebody feels like they have to say who they are and what they are, they're just trying to change the subject. You know, I mean, they will do anything. The big guys or whoever it is you're trying to work with will say anything to avoid the subject, to avoid the issue. Oh, keep in mind, I think it's a good time to point out, this letter is a very crafted, carefully written example of trying to change the subject and avoid the issue. Okay. Very, very careful and obvious. And that's why I'm using this as a prop. But a lot of the times, especially on your way to the parking lot or in the elevator, you will hear people ask you fallacious questions or making fallacious remarks. All they're doing is repeating something they heard. Okay. They heard it somewhere. And so they're just going on, they're using the fallacious remark rather than discuss the issue. Okay. But we're going to talk about what to do when you get the fallacious remark, how to respond to it. But keep in mind, sometimes it's crafted and sometimes it's someone that doesn't really understand what they're doing. And it's okay. You're going to learn the difference between the two. Okay. Next on my list of fallacious remarks. The Rand paper is not about the Army Corps of Engineers. There we go. That wasn't the point defense. So in other words, if the issue that you have isn't the point of a paper or isn't the point of someone said, well, it doesn't matter. Well, except for one thing, there's no such thing as a little mistake. In journalism, especially with the Rand Corporation that published a paper, there's no such thing as a little mistake in journalism. A little mistake is the same as a big mistake. It's a mistake. And this executive director has tried that sad, worn out attempt to say, well, if it's not the point, it doesn't matter. Any mistake in journalism is a big mistake. No such thing as a little mistake. Okay. Again, the paper, we're referring to the Rand paper, of which levy.org had a problem with, is simply not about the factors associated with why the levies failed. Again, another example of that wasn't my point defense, which is a fallacious remark. Okay, moving on. Shoehorning this paper into your efforts to fight for a particular narrative is inappropriate, inaccurate, and unfair. So what the executive director has just done is told me that my organization's actions and campaigns are inappropriate, unfair, and blah, blah, blah. Again, trying to change the subject. I mean, look, let's discuss the issue, shall we? And let's leave off the name calling. Calling me names isn't going to hurt, and calling you names isn't going to hurt either, you, my listeners, who are trying to take on the big guys. If you can't handle being called unfair, maybe you shouldn't take on the big guys, but that's why I'm here. I'm here to help you. Fear not, I'm here. Well, this is interesting. We've finally gotten to the one place in this paper where the executive director actually does discuss the issue. There's one line where it discusses the issue, and I'm going to tell you what it is. I have reviewed your concerns. The data center does not have any intention of taking any further action related to this 3+ year old paper. That's it. That's all the executive director needed to say. He's reviewed our concern. They're not going to do a dang thing. Okay, done. Well, at least we know where they stand, and at least we know the results of our campaign. That's all the executive director should have said, that and nothing else. And by the way, a 3+ year old paper, that's nothing. Nothing. 3+ years might as well be 3 minutes. We are talking about the worst disaster in the history of the United States, the worst civil engineering disaster. So 3+ year old paper, that doesn't matter. We shall continue. Ironically, no one here at the data center disagrees with your position. Well, wonderful. Great. I'm thrilled that nobody disagrees with my position on why the levies failed. Well, thank you for pointing that out, but it has nothing to do with the issue. He's trying to change the subject. It saddens me to see you taking these and other high pressure tactics. Well, you know what he calls a high pressure tactic? A certified letter. He calls that high pressure tactic. I mean, if he thinks that's high pressure, he's obviously hadn't worked with me very much. And again, it saddens me. Well, again, feelings don't matter. Keep your feelings out of it. We've got work to do. You can feel later on the weekend. Okay. As a New Orleans native, I find the language in your petition offensive. There we go again. As a New Orleans native, you are going to get that fallacious remark so often. Wherever you are in the country, be you in Maine or California, you're going to get that, I live here and I would never this, that, or the other. Again, trying to change the subject, trying to make it personal, trying to get you off what you're trying to do and get you onto something else, which is irrelevant. Beware that fallacious remark. Certified letter and high pressure tactics you have employed. So again, we've touched on that a little bit already. And calling them high pressure tactics, well, they're tactics. I don't think a certified letter is high pressure. People do them all the time. But again, I've just been called a user of high pressure tactics. It's a personal attack on me. I ignore it. And last but not least, I will not send further email. He meant to say emails. I will not send further emails about this. But you may call me if you wish to discuss further. Warning, 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 Dr. Smith. Warning, Will Robinson, like the robot in Lost in Space. Once you've had your initial powwow, once you've had your initial conversation, from then on, every conversation must be in writing or Zoom. No further verbal communication after that, because they can't be used. They can't ever be pulled upon. They can't ever be used later on for whatever reason. So I obviously didn't make any attempt to write to him after that, since he said he wasn't going to write back. And of course, I haven't called him. As far as levies.org, we figured that we'd made our point. Anyone that really needs to know knows how we feel about that paper, which is, I believe, still on the website. I haven't checked and looked over at the data center to see if it's still up. And I should also point out, I meant to say this earlier, the data center does good work. We are discussing something very specific here, which is a letter written by one person that works for the data center. Data center has been around for at least 20 years to my knowledge and continues to do good work, and I hope does continue to do good work. So what do you do when you get the fallacious argument? What do you do when you get the fallacious question, which is just designed to throw you off guard? I've only touched on a couple here, but the important thing is to recognize it. It's really anything that pulls you off topic, that pulls you off center. And it could be intentional or it could be accidental, but it's really important that you recognize it. And the first thing you do is take a breath and chill. Don't let it irritate you. For years, I let these irritate me. And there have been times when it showed, my irritation showed through. Look at it as an opportunity to practice your talking points. Welcome the fallacious mark as an opportunity to get them on topic. Okay. Just so long as you recognize that that's what they were doing, trying to pull you off topic, just get them back on. Never be defensive. Always be positive. It not only is it good for your presentation, and it's good to help you convince people and get them on your side, it's also good for your soul. You can't go around angry all the time. Believe me, I know. I had to work very, very hard to not get angry and to not lose my patience and continue, because sometimes excuse me, always, whatever it is you're trying to do, the big guys you're trying to beat, it will always take longer than you thought it would. In your response, use numbers. Okay. Numbers are a nice, comforting anchor. Numbers are data. Numbers are something that you can feel safe using. And when you're using numbers, you're giving value to your listener. You're actually giving them information. And so when you craft your answer, try as much as possible, if you can, to use numbers in your response. And again, don't be defensive. Just to stay positive and answer the question as best you can. There are times when you can ignore the question, but not always. Like if you're at a press conference and the camera's rolling, you can't just ignore the question. In fact, you shouldn't. You should answer it. But keep in mind, use numbers and recognize that they might be trying to just change the subject. Your tone. Again, I've already talked about how important it is to have a positive tone. But there may be times, in fact, there will be times when someone will say, I don't like your tone. And that surprised me so much when I heard that. I've gotten that response both verbally and in writing, that they didn't like my tone. In fact, it was in the climax of my book, tone, and being told someone doesn't like my tone. What that means is there's nothing wrong with your tone. They just don't like what you're saying. They don't like your conclusion. And if they don't have a good response, if they don't have conflicting data, they'll just blame you and blame your tone. So whenever you hear the words, I don't like your tone, take heart, take comfort. You've succeeded because you have just hit them with data that makes them feel uncomfortable, that conflicts with their worldview, which is a good thing. And then take that as your opportunity to educate them and help them see what you see. Don't be surprised if you hear people say, well, okay, I'll take your argument into account. Your argument. That's a fallacious remark. Asking reasonable questions and making valid points. Asking reasonable questions and making valid points. That is how you win. That is how you succeed. Whenever anyone calls that your argument, that is the fallacious remark. Recognize it when you see it and just chuckle, you don't even really need to respond to it. Okay. Recognize it. And it's something that attorneys love to say, your argument. Okay. I am going to wrap up very shortly with another example. And that is what to do when somebody walks up to you in an elevator or the parking lot of the grocery or in writing and makes an outsized, absurd assumption of what it is you're trying to do. Okay. Which will happen. It's going to happen. Why is another conversation for another day, but people will make absurd assumptions of the mission of your group, of what you're trying to do. And I'm going to give you an example. The mission of levees.org, the organization that I founded 16 years ago, is education about why New Orleans flooded during Katrina, because it was grossly exaggerated and the wrong people were blamed for many years. That was our mission. So meanwhile, I'm going to give you two examples. One of the examples is a television station once wrote to me, oh, well, isn't the mission of your organization to make sure all the levees that are being rebuilt by the Army Corps being built properly. And I, at the time, I was so caught off guard by the remark that all I could do was go, that's the job of the levy authority, which has a budget and experts on it. That's their job. But that I sound defensive with that. And the producer wrote back and said, oh, well, that's what I thought your mission was. Never mind, bye. So I gave a terrible response to that. I was defensive. Fast forward, I've gotten smarter, and I want to share that knowledge that I've gained with you. So fast forward to more recently, a supporter of levees.org wrote me an email and asked, how should all of South Louisiana be protected from flooding? Okay, well, now I'm a little bit more savvy. And I wrote back. I said, the Army Corps of Engineers spent $16 billion working on coming up with an answer to that question. And the state organization called the CPRA, the Coastal Restoration Protection Authority, spends almost $1 billion a year, 900 million to be exact, working on finding an answer to that question. And the local levee authorities created after Hurricane Katrina spend about $62 million annually trying to answer that question. So actually, I'm flattered that you thought my little organization, run with volunteers and with no income stream, could answer a question like that. No, really, I'm flattered. And that was my answer. And I emailed it off to the questioner, and he wrote back and wrote, and I quote, excellent answer, both in content and in tone. There you have it. I gave him value. I gave him information. I told him I was flattered, and even though he couldn't see me smiling, the tone of my email was with a smile. Thank you for flattering us. Okay, so I hope that I provided you today with tools that you can use. The reason I felt it was so important to do this episode early in my show, and it's going to be the final episode of season 2, is because these fallacious remarks and fallacious questions are going to come fast. They're going to come right from the beginning. And that's when it's probably most important for you to recognize them. Take a breath, exhale, smile, and if possible, use numbers, respond. Think of it as a way to practice your talking points, answer the question, and move on. I hope this was helpful to you. This is the final episode of season 2. I hope that all of you will join me next season, which is going to be after the Thanksgiving holiday in 2021. And remember, no matter who you are, you too can beat the big guys.